2025. This is Information Security Now. Information Security Now is about software hacking, cybersecurity, information security, current events mostly. It is about reading the landscape, understanding what's going on in the world of information security, and analyzing that in the context of everyday life. So we will begin with an article by CNBC. AI agents are being drafted into the cyber defense forces of corporations. AI generated deepfakes, personalized phishing campaigns, malware, malicious code. So let's continue. AI on the defense. Agentic AI becomes embedded in enterprises like finance and legal. AI is being used on the offensive, so corporations are deciding to bring AI on the defensive as well. Here's a quote from CEO Andy Jassy. Quote, "We have a strong conviction that AI agents will change how we all work and live. Billions of these agents across every company and in every imaginable field focus less on rote work and more on thinking strategically. Our jobs even make, and this will unquote make our jobs more exciting." It will become more exciting. And I've spoken about this in terms of software engineering. Software engineering likely isn't going to die, but low level software engineering, where you might only be writing a few pages of code that interact with each other for something that you really can only deploy on your local machine. Whereas, at least that's how I started. Whereas now you'll want to get into deploying a full web application. And there are some applications like Replit I've heard very positive things about. But even going down to the root, I mean, I've said this for a year now, there's likely going to be more operating systems, maybe just different types of Linux or Unix based operating systems, but people can go way, way deeper. And the consulting business is more going to be a creator business. I think people are going to come from, like, if you want to be a consultant, you're going to have to use AI to create your items. I think Replit was saying that the CEO was saying that one company, one of their customers was finding a great use case in having their designers. So they're not necessarily using that AI tool for code, but the designers are using it to lead the coders and give them the context to engineer into that customer's application, which is huge. Let's continue. Phishing emails can sometimes be laughable, but one person can change, it just takes one person, one incident, one time. Detection engineers. Role-based agents can act as detection engineers, threat intelligence researchers, and again, teaming up with humans. AI can only go so far. It is surely a tool that we all, many people use, and it's really powerful, but they can only go so far. And they can't think of, I mean, they can, but they're not going to create, at least not now. They need to be guided. Okay, so we'll continue. Criminals are using AI to efficiently find vulnerabilities and exploits. Truthfully, AI is really good for that too. It can read through code pages quickly, determine some things off quickly. That's good on the defensive side and the offensive side. So we haven't really, I mean, we have seen a lot of increased attacking, which is why you see a lot of infrastructure items falling vulnerable, likely because they're not going through patch cycles as high as non-infrastructure software. And they are going to make up for a shortage of trained workers. That's true across the board. That's true across the board. There's shortages of highly trained workers, and AI will help a lot of people in consulting and just basic consulting. You still have to be the architect, the designer, the engineer, but if you need some consulting in areas you're not so expert in and probably won't be expert in, but you need structured guidance, specific structured guidance that almost never could be done before. You with the basic search, Google search 3-4 years ago, but with AI, especially with the types of models that have come out in the last year and a half, or because AI has been around for nearly 3 years now. Chat GPT, I believe when it the launch that made it massive and gave, put OpenAI on what I would say the map was in November of 2022, so nearly 3 years ago. I would say the first year and a half of that, the AI models were good, not great. Then 4.0 came, ChatGPT 4.0 came, and 4.0 was a game changer. At least that's how my reflection on it. 4.0 was a step above, and that was an OpenAI product. And now I use a Sonnet 4 a lot, Claude Sonnet 4, and I found it to be really high quality, really one of the best models. I was using AWSQ, and I was using another tool. It might have been ChatGPT. I honestly don't know what model that was. I've used Gemini as well. For coding specifically, Sonnet 4 is on its own wavelength. It is really good. And so it's just interesting to see it evolve. It'll continue to evolve. And as it does, the AI threat becomes more pronounced, much more pronounced. Okay, so we'll continue. There's been a Salesforce data breach that has affected multiple companies. In mid-2025, series of coordinated intrusions targeting Salesforce environments, high-profile companies across diverse sectors, tech, retail, insurance, aviation, luxury, fashion, compromised data from 91 organizations worldwide. That's massive. These are some big names. Few of the airlines, I wonder if those are connected because this name's Qantas Airways and KLM, and both of those companies had hacks a few weeks ago. Google also had a hack. I believe that was the hack we spoke about a couple days ago. That's very unfortunate for Google, who's has a history of high quality cybersecurity. There's a reason you don't hear these companies, Google, AWS, what's another one? Apple. I mean, Apple does get hacked. All these companies do get, targeted for sure, but they have historically good reputations in security. And so, I mean, this wasn't even their instance, supposedly, the one we spoke about. Let's go to an article before we continue on the Salesforce one to Google. Shiny Hunters, yeah. Significant data breach affecting its corporate Salesforce database. Company completing email notifications. Google revealed this on August 5th. UNC 6040 is the name of the group of the cyber group Shiny Hunters. Exposed contact information and related notes for small and medium businesses stored in Google Customer Relationship Management System. Voice phishing technique. Wow, where threat actors impersonated IT support personnel to deceive Google employees into granting system access. Huge. This is one of the vulnerabilities of massive companies, is those types of incidents. That's a vulnerability in many companies. Very, very interesting. Almost surely used an AI phishing system, voice phishing for that. Social engineering is surely the most notorious. There are other forms of cyber intrusion. You have malware, ransomware, but social engineering is a very easy one, and probably would be it's the path of least resistance. It's the path of least resistance. It's easier to trick a human than it is a computer system, unless it's not. When I say that, that means if there's a huge vulnerability and that was deployed by the company who creates that software, then no. But that doesn't happen all the time or often, and especially with bigger companies like Google. So social engineering is a better way for individuals, for hackers to try and hack a company. It's just easier to try and trick a person than to, break Google's security suite, frankly. I mean, if you can do that, you're powerful in that sense. And, you know, that's a really, it's not an easy thing to do. Basic and largely public data was stolen from this, but this is Google. So small window of time before the access was cut off. Notification process began in August. And this was a broader campaign by Shiny Hunters. Link to breach it. So I think this has been, because we spoke about contests. I think we spoke about LVMH a few weeks ago. I didn't know about these other companies, Cisco, Adidas, Alliance. So I'm reading through Cisco. Okay, this was in December 2024. DevHub, December 2024, released on Christmas of 2024. 4.45 gigabytes. Leaked files align with those identified during their initial analysis. It was PII, personal identifiable information, to Cisco CX professional services customers. So it seems this article doesn't say it was a Salesforce instance, but that's what the article previously is insinuating. This is Alliance Insurance, Data breach, 1.4 million customers' data at risk, July 27th, by Guru Baran in Cybersecurity News. Majority of its 1.4 million customers compromised PII, disclosed mandatory filing with Maine's Attorney General, targeted a third-party cloud-based customer relationship management system used by the Minneapolis-based insurer, and that management system supposedly was a Salesforce instance. Social engineering techniques to gain unauthorized access to personally identifiable information belonging to customers. So even though these are instances of Salesforce, they seem to be socially engineering their way. At least that's what it's stated in Google, and here it aligns, is that these are social engineering techniques that are getting access to these databases. Criminals impersonating trusted entities to trick employees into providing access credentials. And this just happened last year. Scattered Spider. We've spoken about Scattered Spider before. They seem to be targeting the insurance industry. They're tracked as UNC 3944 and Octo Tempest. Primarily, listen to this, English-speaking teenagers and young adults from the United States and United Kingdom, unquote. Targeted major companies like MGM Resorts, Caesars Entertainment. I have massive respect for these types of people. I think if they were older, they might not consider this, but doing it, but they're very skilled. It's not easy. I think that there's no privacy in this world. So it's a very risky thing to do, and I don't want to romanticize it. If you listen to the stories of hackers, it's a very stressful thing. It's a very stressful thing to do, and if you listen to the stories of hackers, very often they get caught. There's just too much of a paper trail on the internet in through technology until there's not, and then then you talk about some things like wiperware, which we spoke about last week. So Scattered Spider was linked to the attacks against UK retailer Marks and Spencer's. Wow. Okay. As well as aviation and transportation companies. Okay. So this is part of the whole. Wow, this was all connected. What an interesting phenomenon. Adidas Korea has announced a security breach. Customer names, emails, addresses, phone numbers, birth dates, and physical addresses. This came a few days after Dior faced similar data breach. This happened in May 2025. Phishing attempts. It seems that this may have also been a social one, but it doesn't say for sure. Okay. And Louis Vuitton hacked also in July following M&S and also customer information. Wow. The attack vector likely exploited zero-day vulnerabilities in the company's CRM, customer relationship management systems, bypassing standard intrusion detection systems and web application firewalls. The breach may have utilized advanced persistent threat techniques, allowing attackers to maintain lateral movements within the network for extended periods before detection. The interesting thing, I would be curious to know. I don't necessarily know what that means, but basically what I thought of when I think of when I hear utilize advanced persistent threat techniques is you deploying an AI into the software system and having the AI make decisions as it goes through the system. That's a very scary thing to do. Think about. That's like an autonomous malware. You would hope you'd need to create some very good. It could be very destructive. Ransomware as a service operations, supply chain attacks. So that is seems to be the issue. So we'll go back to the general Salesforce incident. So shiny hunters. So there were no vulnerabilities within Salesforce itself. The incidents demonstrate how social engineering can bypass technical controls when users are misled into granting permissions. So that's really interesting. And stolen data has been linked to extortion attempts. How the Salesforce data breach happened. Intrusions were carried out through a combination of phishing and abuse of Salesforce connected app features, according to Google. They posed as IT staff, called employees in English speaking branches of multinational companies and convinced them to follow urgent troubleshooting steps. I think the one thing you can surely understand is people who call you are much more likely, if they're contacting you, reaching out to you, you may want them to be who they say they are, and you may want them, they might be stating something that is positive for you or may entice you to listen and act according to whatever they say because it sounds great. But no, you need to, especially by calling, email, of course, as well as vulnerable, but you need trusted sources, verify cross trusted sources. So have multiple routes for verification so that you don't have just this one point of contact that may be corrupted. So the social engineering phone call goes out. The user requests credentials. Salesforce Connect code is approved. The data loader application is added and the data is exported. They authorized a malicious OAuth application controlled by their attackers, like a Trojan of Salesforce legitimate data loader. It was disguised. Wow. And they didn't exploit again. According to Google Threat Intelligence Group, the attackers did not exploit any technical vulnerability in Salesforce itself, relying entirely on manipulating end users. MFA was bypassed. That's really unfortunate. And then a Telegram channel was created where they posted samples of stolen data and listed targeted companies, which acts as a psychological tool. Yeah. Wow, okay. So this was not Scattered Spider. They thought it was Scattered Spider, who was behind the 2023 MGM resort breach, which used phone-based social engineering, but this was Shiny Hunters. And they breached Snowflake. It's really interesting to consider a breach. An admin of Shiny Hunters was arrested. Extortion as a service. Decentralized extortion as a service collective. Not a single coordinated team. Wow. That's what a way to use decentralized financial technology. What an interesting world. Again, I don't want to romanticize it. It's crime. But it's a very, very novel form of digital digital security. So this article goes really deep, and it lists all of the vulnerabilities. Adidas customer contact info in May 2025, Cartier in May 2025, Google in June and was cut off quickly, Louis Vuitton in July, Dior in May, Tiffany and Company in April for their Korean. Dior was also Korean. The South Korean was affected. South Korean customers. Air France in July, August. Alliance Life Insurance in July. Cisco in July. Pandora in August. This is a very it seems like a lot of this is happening within the last 2 or 3 months, and that makes sense because they can overwhelm this even if it's not technically a Salesforce vulnerability coded in. There may be a change of protocol to account for this. So for them, it makes sense to go across all vectors of attack before any sort of change of protocol is made to make their form of social engineering this way that they figured out to go in and get the data to extort, because it seems to be affecting a lot of companies very, very quickly within the last, I mean, these are massive companies, and it's all happened within the last 2 or 3 months. Okay. These, yeah, they're all within Salesforce related data breaches. And then the Telegram channel across multiple cyber groups. And across multiple different domains. And when I say domains, I guess I mean different countries. All right, so I'll continue now. So Pennsylvania Attorney General website and phone system was shut down Monday. And they had to, the office posted from Facebook. That might become a new standard. I think that might become a new standard. I know people don't want to necessarily do that, but a lot of entities might not be able to. I mean, this is something we saw with the cloud too, where you just got to the point where companies wanted to do their own, have their own infrastructure, own their own data, but it became risky. It became less risky to just let people who are experts in cloud infrastructure do their work and you use their service. You might see that with hosting information. I mean, we already see that with the individual, but as the creator and the this more decentralized economy where you see scale, especially with AI scale, you might not need to have the level of human capital that you did before to run a company. Surely robotics will matter, but I think for purely digital companies that have purely digital products, that's certainly true. It becomes more of a liability than an asset. Whereas before you take on the liability of having more vectors of attack because you can't have anything that you don't have any tool that can even come close to mimicking human work. You don't have anything that can pass a Turing test. Now you have something that can slightly pass a Turing test. And I'm sure, actually, I believe it can pass a Turing test. You really can't tell. I mean, to a certain degree you can, but if, that's not, I'm just going to continue. But with that said, we'll just see possibly that happen as different entities don't have the ability to have as much to centralize as much human capital as they used to be. So there was no update on why that is, why Pennsylvania. So we'll keep an eye on that in the coming days. Okay, let's sophisticated. So we will figure out what happened in the coming days, and we'll also review what happened. Oh, maybe. So this occurred Friday. The website remains offline. Email system health is not reachable. So, and cybersecurity sleuth Kevin Beaumont drew attention to two of the Office of Attorney General Citrix boxes on noting they are both vulnerable to security flaw. Wow. Tracked as CVE 2025-5777. Affects various NetScaler ADC gateway versions. Wow. Wow. NetScaler boxes appear to be offline now. So this vulnerability was even published, supposedly. And that's not good. That's not good. So let's continue. So we do know what happened there. We'll continue to look at it. All right, okay, there's one last thing that I think is really interesting. So this is from industrialcyber.co. Brazil's healthcare system is under siege from cyber threats. Better information sharing. Stark escalating cyber attacks, leaving patient data and critical infrastructure increasingly vulnerable, very vulnerable. The medical information is such a sensitive topic and makes people extremely vulnerable when that's shared. Ransomware gangs crippling hospital operations, state-sponsored actors targeting sensitive medical data. Health organizations are under pressure in Brazil. It's fragmented. The landscape is fragmented, and the threats outpace preparedness. And again, this is the most insidious thing about cybersecurity is these companies that are affected are not technology companies. They're just their operation sets are just, and their supply chains are all linked to technology. And that's the really interesting thing about that is they are all deeply affected by software and the vulnerabilities in software. Fragmented care between rural and urban clinical environments. And let's see. There's a large data stores in centralized healthcare access, and they're frequent targets. So, and Brazil seems to not have the strongest enforcement action against illicit digital groups. Banking Trojans and ransomware attacks. And hacktivism. So hacktivists, not sure if people know, but hacktivists generally lean left and liberal. And so you'll see a lot of conservative entities get attacked by hacktivists. DDoS attacks, web defacement campaigns, targets industry companies like oil and gas and mining. What an interesting and compelling reality. Thank you everyone for this, for joining me. Information Security Now. We reviewed AI agents and their role in information security. We reviewed Pennsylvania and the Attorney General's office. We reviewed the social engineering techniques that are being used to bypass security mechanisms into Salesforce instances, and we reviewed just briefly some issues in Brazilian digital infrastructure through healthcare primarily. Thank you, everyone. It is August 12th. Hopefully you have a good day and a good week ahead of you.